A big aloha and welcome. I'm CindyPaulos here today with a man who I just adore, who was such an important part of In the Hands of God. Actually, was a lot of the inspiration that carried the soul of In the Hands of God, and that's Stephen Melillo. Maestro from Stormworks Studio. How are you, Stephen?
Good. How are you?
So good to see your studio there. I just love the energy you have there. If people haven't known about you, I mean, you just love creating. You've done over 1,000, I think 1,200 pieces that you've created.
As of today, 1,268.
1,268. I mean, I think that is just part, I think it's in your whole system, in your blood. You just seem to thrive on creating, which is a major blessing for me. Because when I turned to you to do the orchestrations for the pieces that Father Coral Pete Van Eden did, you
Mm.
understood them beautifully. We kind of had started with the song "In the Hands of God," and then you had created this amazing instrumental that really, really, really rang true in my soul to me, which was called Deceduto. And I found it, you sent it to me, and I listened and I listened. I must have listened to that piece in 1 week, probably about 50 times. And I still listen on a regular basis to Deja Dudo. And what I captured in that feeling of that song was that there was a mystery. There was this descending of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit in a way, and it was calling. And in a way, when it was calling me to let something open up, something like the doors to heaven to open up. And what happens when you're right at that launch point? So, so
Mhm.
that song was very, very, very important to me. And I know it's been part of a larger group of haikus you've been doing. I'd never heard of the term of a musical haiku before I met you, Stephen. So maybe you can explain where the idea of these musical haikus came from and a little bit of a deceduto.
So, for me, a musical haiku is just a short piece, but because I've always been involved in like Oriental culture, like one of so my first year of college, I was a physics major, but I was an Oriental philosophy minor, and I've always been connected to through the martial art, the philosophy like the Tao Te Ching and so on and so forth. So the musical haiku to me was just a short expression, like a normal word that a musician would use would be the word prelude. They're sort of preludes, but for me they were more poetic in um, in the intended message of them. And so I said, well, they're like a haiku, except they're musical, so they're musical haikus. So that's really where that term came from. That goes all the way back to maybe 1976 or 77 when I started doing these things. So another aspect of the musical haiku is that they're rhapsodic in some way. Like for instance, I wrote a piece called Pilate's Question. So this is the question that too bad Father wasn't on right now. This is the question that Pontius Pilate asked Jesus: What is truth? So what I did for this musical haiku, and again, this is going way back. So this is like in the '80s when they just started with MIDI and they just started with the synthesized keyboards and that sort of thing. And my goal was to turn on a clock and to give myself a predetermined amount of time, which in that piece was 5 minutes, and essentially in a rhapsodic sort of way improvise this piece called Pilot's Question. And I had like instruments set up in advance. So if I needed to make a change, I would hit a sustain pedal and then make a patch change and then come back and play again so that I had between the strings and a gong and maybe like a Middle Eastern type of instrument, I had everything that I wanted orchestration wise, and then I would create these pieces. So then from there, that evolved to basically I was always aiming at 333. So if a piece was 333, it was going to be a musical haiku. Of course, now of course they can go longer and they can be shorter. So Deceduto, which is the Italian word for deceased, um, was a musical haiku. Now, just to give you a feeling for this, this might be a little neat little trick here if I can pull it off. Let me just share my screen with you because it'll just save. Oh no, you can't. You want to enable your screen sharing?
I can do share
That,
screen, but then it goes to my computer.
yeah. Well, no, but I'll share my screen with you.
Okay, so I'll hit share screen. We'll see what happens here. There you
Yep.
are on the desktop. Shall I hit the
No.
desktop again? No?
Oh no, it's not working. I'm hitting
Yeah,
my share screen, but well,
yeah.
anyway, I'm looking at, believe it or not, 33 songs
Wow.
in this one album that I just finished. And Deceduto was part of it. It's 2 hours and 11 minutes of music,
Wow.
and there's 33 pieces in there. So let's see if you can hear a little bit in the background as I'm speaking.
I had forgotten that you had told me Deceduto is deceased. And it's
Yeah.
so,
But when I do this, can you hear the piece playing
yes.
in the
Yeah,
background?
I can hear it. Yeah.
Okay, so I can score myself.
And oh,
They'll just
drops,
I'll
drops,
just uh, I'll just lower it though a little bit.
drops of notes just kind of coming in there to that, again, that rhapsodic. And I love that term rhapsodic, that
Yeah.
rhapsodic music that you created.
Well,
And
you see,
again,
there's
prelude. That's a prelude as well, right? That sound is a
yeah.
prelude.
Well, some composers might call it a prelude. Some, it all depends on the composer time, the time period, of course. But for me, they were always well like this. It's like it's a musical haiku. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
It's a little expression of connecting in a poetic way to the universe. And I know it sounds a little bit
Oh, that's
corny or whatever.
exactly that. You couldn't describe it better. That is exactly the feeling I get when I listen to this, connecting to the universe. It's almost like a little tap, tap, tap on your shoulder in the beginning. It's like, hello,
Yeah.
like a bird will call you in the morning, pop, pop, and someone's
Yeah.
tapping on your window, and there's this like this energy, and then talk about rhapsodic. Then you bring in the strings, and I have to say, in a way, those strings remind me of what happens when you listen to that beautiful theme song from Out of Africa when they were flying over the
Oh yeah,
flamingos,
yeah.
that little plane. You know that scene where they look
No,
down
but
over the flamingos?
that's good. I like to be compared to John Barry. I'll take it. Thank you.
He has that same sound when he brings in that almost that same key when you bring in the violins, da da, and his notes on flying over that is just what he uses. And you have to go listen to the soundtrack for Out of
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's cool.
because again, there you're taking off, and then it sings to me so beautifully. And even as you take off in this beautiful song, you feel like something's opening, but then you take it to the end of the musical haiku, and you still feel like then that's another jumping off place to something else magical happening, but you don't know quite what. And that's why it's beautiful that you call it deceased, because I think in a way, you might be really capturing what happens when you leave your body, soar off into heaven, and then what, right?
Right. I think that's part of the idea of the title, right? Because a lot of people will think of deceased as terminated. It's over. I also wrote another piece called Descent into Heaven. Now, normally we think of ascent into heaven, right? But I wrote a piece called Descent into Heaven, and sometimes you have to fall into this the question. And that's another piece on my CD, by the way. The question. So you fall into these things, and you listen and you respond. What is it that needs to be expressed? For me, when I get a message, what am I supposed to share? It's always hope. Share
Mm.
hope. Share something that's good, because the world's already filled with enough darkness. See, it's all connected. That even leads back to my Fourth Symphony. The title of the Fourth Symphony, which was premiered in Canton, Ohio, with the Canton, Ohio Orchestra, is Lightfall. And I
Mm.
explained to the audience, I said, we think of nightfall. We always think of when we think of these things, we always think of darkness, falling upon us. But this is light falling upon us, lightfall. So these are the kind of things that are all over these 1,268 pieces.
Well, I'm so glad there's going to be 30 and this new one, 2 hours worth of music just about. I mean, are you going to do it as a double? Are you going to put that
Yeah,
on CD at all? Or are you going to just,
yeah. So this is so I did the gray, and see what is the gray? Well, the gray is when you look up at the sky and you can't see the stars and you can't see the moon and you can't see the sunrise and you can't see the sunset because there's clouds in front of this, right? But the reality is there are stars and there is a sunrise and there is these things. We are in an illusion. We are seeing a veil, a kind of an illusion. Um, and so that's the gray. So now there's going to be the gray 2 and 3 um, combined because, like I said, it's 2 hours and 11 minutes, and it's all pieces, after the fall, Deceduto, even before I met you, Gethsemane. Oh, see, Father would love being on. I dreamed of love. In the blessing of smoke, a question. The learned astronomer. This is like Walt Whitman's poem.
yeah.
A lullaby a dad sings to his child. Um, a father is singing, or a parent is singing to his child, who's at war, and he's using the Brahms lullaby. Only it's my arrangement of it. Uh,
I can't help
my
but thinking there also when you say a father singing to his child, we want to reflect the Father in God singing also to his children, us, at
oh, that's
war.
all the time. Yeah,
And
that's
and
all the
and
time.
yeah, right. That's all the time. And when I listen to your music, I get transported to those really heavenly places where you do that. And it was interesting at a young age, I had this enlightenment experience where I left my body and I left the planet. And when I
Hmm.
looked down on the planet from a higher state and found a union with God, I could see the whole planet in that gray. I could see the whole
Hmm.
planet surrounded with that gray and couldn't help but think if light could come in, if light could break away that illusion and people could see the beauty of the love and the light that's present, what a wonderful thing. And thinking that again, this is the grand design to understand that God is that light and that love that breaks through the gray. So your music holds a huge, huge impact and I resonate so well with it. I just love it. And we made an unusual decision because the rest of the pieces on In the Hands of God were pieces that Father wrote, Father Corel Pete Van Eden, and with your beautiful orchestrations. But I really did make an exception, ask you if we could include Deceduto in this because it did feel like it was a starting off point for a lot of what I was trying to express, and it carried. And at one point, I asked if I could put words to it, and you said, "No, I prefer not." And I'm glad you said that, and I honored that because again, here we are trying to describe it. Sometimes music says so much, and listening to your music, I have written many words. And Deceduto does have so much impact it carries, even without words, that you can go beyond the words to hear this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then there was one piece that had a very interesting story, which was, and it was like you went, oh, I don't know. It was a message from God. And it was so interesting because this was not like the other pieces. In fact, it's funny. Father wrote some of these pieces to my words, and I didn't really get to hear them. This was one of the pieces I never heard until you did the orchestration of it, Stephen.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
really had no idea until I heard your orchestration what was written with this. So it was a major surprise. It's like, wow, this is totally different than what the other pieces are like. It's rather rapid, it's up, it's joyful, and it wasn't what I expected at all because the
Yeah.
rest of the pieces are, not necessarily rhapsodic, but they're introverted in a way, or almost
Well,
done like
they're hymns.
they're hymns.
The other pieces that Father wrote are more like hymns, and this was like sort of like a contemporary Christian thing. Like okay, this is a confession time. So when I go to church, right, and and they do the kind of songs that have the tambourine things going on in them and
Yeah,
everything like that. I basically shut down,
yeah,
because I sort of grew up with like the traditional hymns, with the organ and so on and so forth that you hear, and all of the of Father's music was like that. But this one piece was like it was different. And so what's interesting would be if people could have heard the first version and then what it transmogrified into, right? So in other words, we kept some of that, yum bum 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 bum.
yeah.
We sort of kept that
Kind of
that
bounce,
whole little thing.
kind of
Yeah,
bounce little, yeah, interlude.
right. But then it totally changes, and then it becomes something completely different. And that's because you gave me that license, and you said, because I said, can we try something different? And I think it's better
Yes.
because it's not as repetitive, and it's suddenly it just takes you to a place you didn't think you were going to go, and then you're there, and that's the message of God.
So the words go and message from God. This is what I gave Father before I knew what the music was going to say is call upon your faith and believe that it's time to gather up your strength.
Mm.
Join the servants of the Lord divine. Shine the light to show the love that you truly are. Long has been the road that has brought you here. I am here with you as promised on this day. So lay down all your burdens and your fears. Be
Mm.
here now, for I am always here, bringing in the I am that I am. I am in the breath of the Spirit and the breaking of the dawn. I am here with you as promised. I'd be with you when this journey had begun. I am always here. I am always here to help you, to forgive, hope to lead you, and to fulfill the ancient promise given to you when you prayed, so that God's will can be done today, forevermore, forevermore. And again, it's so interesting because when I first heard it, I went, well, I didn't expect it to be like that. But then when we talked, I had there was a little bit of instrumentation and orchestration you put in there that I thought, wow, this could be the oboe like in Ennio Morricini's the oboe in the Mission, because I always loved that, right? So there's this kind of oboe that's like the soul that you put in that comes in and it's like this other voice in between those words that are actually this that I feel like it's the soul speaking, and it's coming in from a higher source and goes more and more like, okay, I am here. You get your tongue. I am here, and that then becomes the voice of God, which I wrote as a separate piece, and I wanted to get in there, but we weren't sure how we would do that. So it was an interesting morphing of just the instrumentation of this other entire what would you call the more lyrical voice that you put between the rather da 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 in message, but there was this another line of music you created which
Yeah,
leads up to the end. So what would you call
yeah.
that other lyrical line?
A counterpoint,
Yes. Yeah.
to be technical. But you
Yeah.
see, what's very interesting about what you just did. So, let's say you lined up three composers, right? And you did just what you did there, which I have never heard, by the way, until just now on this session. Been the composer, it would have been completely different music. Like for instance, when you read that, you accented the word ancient. You were talking about an ancient voice. Well, that one adjective would have triggered an entire different kind of an orchestration for me. I would have created something that sounded like it was coming way from the past.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then what I would have asked you to do, because I wouldn't ever, again, this is all personal and subjective,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have that be a song. I
Mm-hmm.
would say, Cindy, just say these words the way you want to say them, and we'll make that a voice. And
Mm.
now the orchestra becomes the counterpoint to that speaking. So it's sort of like a film score in a way, where you speaking the words is the given. That's the film, and then the scoring of that, right? And it would be, you would find me writing music more like Deceduto, maybe, except
Yeah.
orchestrated differently, so that it would sound primal. It would sound like it was coming from the past. So that's what's interesting, right? You could talk about inspiration and the vibes that you get and so on and so forth. They're an interesting combination of subjective and eternal, right? I mean, there's certain, like a composer who's really writing and is void of all these considerations like ego, market. You just get rid of all that stuff. And a composer who's really responding to things is a combination of very subjective, right? Because that's like a prayer. I mean, you're the one saying the prayer, but it's also very objective because you're listening to what you're asked to write. And so that sort of yin and yang, right? That becomes the piece.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up because there's a cross, right? And you once told me about something I had never heard of before, Stephen. I'm very grateful because I learned so much from you. But in your music, you do create this feeling a lot of times with your horns because you are a horn player. You create this kind of, the horns as a way of like that cross point of going to understanding that cross where you get free sometimes. I hear it in Deceduto and many of your pieces where you're going bringing the horns just before you're about to launch into the next thing. It heralds. You use your horns to herald something coming, and you often understand that struggle of spirit and form by that point. You told me about this thing that was I'd never heard of before, which is part of the it starts at the Philip, what's it start, FIL, that point there, they're in between with the center core of a song is often described as that, and you told me that is an interesting point that's achieved in certain songs. And I'm struggling here because I can't remember the term that is the
Are we
center.
talking about the golden mean or the
Yes,
Fibonacci?
and
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
it. And I
Yeah.
had never known about that, but you seem to understand how to use that beautifully in your music. And it's expressed in everything, like Burns and lots of paintings and what do you again call that?
Well, the golden mean and the Fibonacci series are related. So Bach wrote everything in the Fibonacci series, and all of the Stormworks music that I compose is in the Fibonacci series. So in other words, just to make a very simple point of it, if you have an 8-bar phrase, right? Most people will write 4 and 4. I mean, that's what you hear like in pop music and so on and so forth. Bach and me too will not go 4 and 4. They'll go 3 and 5 because 3 and 5 are numbers in the Fibonacci series. Now it still goes to 8, but we're doing it in this different way. And these relationships create golden means. Like if you went 5 to 3 to get to the 8, you'd have you'd have an arch that took you to a certain point, and that would be the golden mean, roughly 2/3 of a piece. Now, who did this? Beethoven, Mahler, Mozart. I mean, everybody that you can think of who was aware of this mathematical order in things. So a lot of times, like musicians, they'll hear the word math and they'll instantly shut off, and they don't realize the music is mathematics.
Mhm.
It's frequency. So you're talking about, well, in your words, the way you describe Deceduto, you say, it's that high frequency thing and so on and so forth. But really, it's sort of numerical, and I'm not taking away from it when I use that. I'm just describing something in a different way because as listeners, we're feeling these sympathetic vibrations. So the composer is doing things like at one side being completely aware of the physical side of things to engage the parameters of physics, right? And then on the other side, completely uh, spiritual, so that there. See, that's what music really is. Music is like this paradoxical, but yet perfectly. That's why yin and yang is so good. But perfectly blended paradox between the mind and the heart and the soul. That's what music is. You can't escape one or the other.
Mhm.
If you just try to be emotional, right? Well, we won't listen to that music 250 years from now. If Beethoven went into a stage and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Look at the emotion that I have," right? Would we listen to that piece 250 years from now? But take that exact same scream and put it into the architecture of the Ninth Symphony, and suddenly that scream lasts for eternity.
Wow. Okay, so
That's real
that's
music.
so powerful. But my father was a structural engineer, and he built a lot of amazing homes. But he knew the structure because he wasn't just an engineer.
Mm.
He was a designer, but he was a structural engineer. And he
That
did
is huge.
higher calculus, and he loved playing with that. But then, see, when I went into that point beyond my body, I went to a stage where there was nothing but geometrics and higher calculus and symbols, and
Mm.
that there's a level actually of there is a dimension of
Mm.
geometrics, which is very, very, very key. And it's how beautiful that we can combine in music those higher geometrics with the music of the spheres, with what we have here, with our emotions and feeling on earth. And I think you really do this, Stephen, in a beautiful way, like no one else I know. I mean, maybe Ennio Morricini, and a few others, but it's so nice that you are. And I have to circle around back to something you said, because I love this music so much. I asked you to do "In the Hands of God" as an instrumental that I could do a spoken word piece, that I was going to say goodbye to my sister because this piece was
Mm.
dedicated to my sister who had passed away July 29th. And I wanted to have it in time for her birthday, April 18th, which magically it was done. Thank you, God, because there were some challenges, the CD baby, etc. on that. But the thing in this was when you did the instrumental version, it brought me to tears. It was so, so beautiful. And we have the song "In the Hands of God," but you switched it up as the instrumental because you brought in energy there that I didn't expect. And it opened up another realm. So fast forward to right after us getting "In the Hands of God" out, I said, I really would like to see this done just instrumentally as well, because it touched me so much when I heard you do that version of "In the Hands of God" instrumentally. And I've been listening and listening and listening. We have that done. What happens now is there's only really like, because I'm not including Deceduto, there's only like 5 or 6 songs. It's very short, not long enough for an album. So I've been thinking and thinking and meditating what to do. And I went, you know what? I really would like to create some spoken word pieces that go with
Mm.
it. And you
Mm.
just opened the door to that again, saying, if I were to do this with words, you'd create pieces that would be in a different way, which was always been my dream to have that happen. But usually
Mm.
I do a spoken word piece and then I put it over some music. So
Yes.
now this
Yeah,
is,
that's actually going backwards. See,
yes.
so let me quickly tell you about Kurtwood Smith. Now, Kurtwood Smith, I asked him if he would read the soliloquy, all of the lines from Moby Dick that Ahab speaks, because I had set them to music. Now, when I went to Los Angeles to record Kurtwood, I didn't play the music that I had written. It's 26 minutes of music.
Mm,
I didn't play this music at all. All I said to Kurtwood was, Kurtwood, read these lines the way you would say them as an actor who is trying to make us feel what Ahab went through. And what there was a moment, it was just him and me in that booth together, and he did this one thing and he went 40 years ago. And I was weeping. when I was just a boy, a harpooner. And I was like, oh my God, this guy with his voice, took about an instrument. He had the ability to make me cry just by the way he was choosing the words and accenting words and elongating words. Now I went to Germany with him and I conducted that music to him speaking.
Oh, wow.
That's what's got to happen with CindyPaulos. CindyPaulos has to, just like you did before, you have to speak those words the way you hear them, with those accents, with those feelings, and then let a composer interpret or score or create a background. I mean, there's a million options
Hmm.
to what it means to say those words.
Well, as you know, I write every day after I meditate, and I meditate every day, and I probably have, I don't know, 20,000 things I've written, but half of them were before computers, so they're gone. But now I put them in my, so I put them on my notes in my phone after I do them. And then they sometimes get chosen, because some pieces, as you well know, will yell at you a little louder than others. Some will tell you, "Hey, hey, I want to be heard. Will you do something with me, please?" Some are just kind of little things I'm sure you write that are thoughts, but some want to be birthed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I do that and get something, and then it can be hatched because it wants to be hatched enough, right? But with fertile ground, with fertile and being recognized, and you have to listen enough to hear when it's screaming at you too. Sometimes it'll knock you over the head if you don't scream, but you know when that happens, and if you listen, you'll get more, and it'll grow. If you don't listen, I found that's why I write every day. This morning, I had no idea. I was just down this morning. I was just like, oh my God, what am I going to write? I mean, sometimes that happens. I guess some people would call it writer's block, but I don't. So I've learned enough after doing this every day of my life. And I just still start. You just start. And sometimes
Mm.
things will come through that are amazing, even if your mind and your feelings are going, I don't feel anything today. I don't know what to write. And they do, I found that out. So you trust the process, and you trust like what's happening now when magic happens, like what you just said. I mean, there's nothing more that I would love than to be able to do some of these words and have music created with them as well. So that's going to be the evolution, where this is going to go with the instrumentations that we did and wherever it grows into for the next one, which will be out, later this year, I'm sure, because I'll start and you'll start, and we'll create. And I feel, I can't even put into words how grateful I feel to you, Stephen, because when you really are only like half of able to really create music, I can do the words, I can do like single notes, but it's always been frustrating because I know sometimes songs want to come and I don't have that ability. And even though I can do single notes on my piano, bam, 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 when I see what you provide, it's like, wow, what a gift. And not only can you do the music, you do music that lifts and elevates everything around it and brings people to tears. Within the Hands of God, when I heard it, I was just like, this is better than I ever could imagine. But I never would have guessed when that was done that I would indeed experience these other challenging, life threatening situations where they came
Mm.
forth. When I was outside the ER, because you can't go in because of COVID, and my significant other was very well, he had died, 15 minutes dead, but they brought him back to life. But very,
Unbelievable.
not knowing, yeah, miraculous, because I think 1 or 2% of people can come back from that. But I had this amazing chaplain that, again, I just took my phone. I said, I've got to play this song in the hands of God. I had it in my phone. I played it. She listened. I listened outside there. I started crying into my mask. She started crying into her mask. I had one of the CDs that had just come out and I gave it to her. And she listens. She says she listens to it every day now before she goes in as a chaplain, because she's not only a chaplain to all the patients, but to the doctors and nurses as well. And she says when she listens to that music, it gives her the strength to know what she can do. and she's, I mean, it's you know, I mean, how could we have guessed when we did this that it would touch? I've always said if I can touch one person with the music, you know, and with her, not only did I touch her, but now she's touching other people with what she's getting from that music. So what more can you ask for in a piece of music?
Hmm. We were in Italy one time. I was this Italian band, and we went on early in the morning. I guess it was some kind of competition. It was in Switzerland. I had traveled with them, and we got there. It was early in the morning, and the audience was not packed. Right? I mean, there was only a couple people in the audience, and I heard the Italian band members saying, "Oh, you know, we came all this distance. We did all, you know, and there's so few people." And I said, "Do you believe that every person is infinite?" And this girl said, the girl said, "Well, yeah." You know, I said, "Then we're playing for an infinite audience."
Wow.
And that's, you always have to think that way. If, you know, my grandfather, here's another quick. So the very first piece that I wrote, Only for Now, which had its anniversary on May 3rd, I think I included you in that email. They played it in MIT. That was the first big piece. I mean, it was the first piece I wrote, period. But it was big. It was a 90-minute
Oh,
piece, but in movements. And my grandfather was there. And that was the last concert my grandfather saw.
wow.
And so for the rest of my teaching career, I used to tell the kids, because you know, like, you know, when there were kids and they'd get stage fright and so on and so forth, and I said, you know what, guys, here's what'll end your stage fright right now. In that audience, in every audience that you're ever going to play for, there's a person who has never heard a concert before. Could be a baby, could be someone. And there's someone else in that audience for whom that concert will be the last thing that they hear. Just play for those two people.
Wow.
And I'll
Great,
tell you, I used
great
to have
stuff.
stage fright, but not after that.
Yeah.
No.
Beautiful, beautiful advice. You know, I really do know that the dedication that drives you is truly from spirit and from God, and because you couldn't do what you're doing, Stephen. You couldn't reach the heights of where you're coming from without that. You know, you do have that creative genius in you, and of course, then the books and all the other things you're doing, and now the gray, which I can't wait to hear. I don't know. The thing is, how do you finish something? That are you done with the gray? Are you going to have that out? Are you going to finally send it out to the world?
Most of the gray is done. I'm waiting on live viola recordings, live harp recordings. Everything else is done. I mean, I could send you some stuff if you want to hear it.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? I always love. I'm going to finish today with that part that I asked you to speak. And if I'd sent it to you in advance, I would have had you speak it. But it is on, I will play this at the end of our talk here, the version that you
Mm,
did. But this was the interweave we did on Message from God. I am here beside you, living in the presence. Listen to the words speaking of my love. I can hear your heart bleeding and prayers that are sent to me in every breath.
mm.
Believe Elohim, the living God. Listen to the whispers of the Holy Spirit. Let it lift you to the light to know Elohim's language of the soul. And then you end with I am here with you. And that merges also with Darlene. I think she's also singing that one, I am here with you.
Right.
And that heavenly feeling of like, okay, no more need for words. I'm here with you. You know, we are present and joined as one in Elohim, the living language of the one God, which I looked up also, by the way, and that is in used in Aramaic. Aramaic is I do some
Hmm.
Aramaic prayers. The Lord's Prayer I learned in Aramaic, but Elohim is used to describe um, God and the Son and the Father in Aramaic. So
Wow.
It's such a pleasure to talk to you and see you. I really can't wait till our next adventure together in music and words, which we'll be starting, and we'll create the next amazing piece, which who knows? It's in God's hands where
There
that's
you
going to
go.
lead us, right? There are times in this last year, so many times it's in the hands of God. People can go to inthehandsofgod.com and find out more about you. And you have Stormworks. You have a lot, but what's the best site for you for people to find out more about
It's stormworld.com.
Stormworld?
Stormworld.com. Because Stormworks is the name of the self-publishing entity, but the website is Stormworld.
And there's a wealth of music if people want to go to the streaming sites that you have. I found you, and many streaming sites in many places, but I found you in Amazon Music, and they can listen to the haikus that they put in haiku as well. They can be led to some of those haikus we were talking about, with
Hmm.
more to emerge soon, right?
A lot more. Yeah.
God willing. Well,
Hmm.
God bless you, Maestro. I always learn when I talk to you, and I always get inspired, and new things blossom. So thank you, and thank you, God.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.